Imagine you're floating in a pool late at night. The water's warm, the lights are dim, everything is quiet, and then just beneath the surface, something looks back at you. Not a reflection, not a shadow, something with eyes, something that smiles. And the worst part? You're already too deep to get out in time. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear is one of the most disturbing stories we've ever covered here at Midnight Horror Vault. This is Momo, and tonight she found a pool. You're still here? Good, because this story gets worse before it gets better. Actually, it never really gets better. So turn off the lights, get comfortable, and whatever you do, don't look at the water. Before we go any further, if you're new here, welcome to Midnight Horror Vault, the place where the dark stuff lives. Hit that like button right now and subscribe so you never miss a night like this one. We drop horror stories that stay with you long after the video ends. Now, let's get into it. It started the way most horrible things start, quietly, without warning, without any sign that the world you knew was about to crack open and show you something underneath that you were never meant to see. The summer of 2019 in a quiet suburb just outside of Columbus, Ohio. A family, a backyard, a pool. Everything about it looked normal. A modest two-story house with blue shutters, a wood fence around the yard, a big above-ground pool sitting in the corner near the oak tree. The kind of setup that thousands of American families have. The kind of yard where kids should be laughing and splashing and making memories. But that summer, something else made its way into that water, and it didn't leave. The family's name was the Heartleys, David and Karen, their 14-year-old son Tyler, and their 9-year-old daughter Lily. David worked in logistics. Karen was a nurse who worked night shifts 3 times a week. They were a good family, normal people, the kind of people nothing is supposed to happen to. But that's the thing about horror. It doesn't care how normal you are. It started with Lily. Of course it did. It always starts with the youngest one, because children see things that adults have already taught themselves to ignore. Their eyes haven't been trained to look away from the impossible. They haven't learned to tell themselves that didn't happen, or you were just tired, or it was just the light. Kids see it all, and Lily saw it first. It was a Tuesday evening in late June. Karen was at work. David was inside watching the game. Tyler was up in his room gaming with headphones on. Lily was outside alone by the pool, doing what she always did in the summer, dangling her feet in the water, watching the ripples, making up little stories in her head. She was an imaginative kid, creative, always drawing, always telling these elaborate stories about made-up worlds and made-up creatures. So when she came inside that night and told her dad that she'd seen a face in the pool, he didn't think much of it. "A face?" David had said, not looking up from the screen. "In the water, Daddy. A lady's face, but her neck was really long and she was smiling at me." David looked up then. He studied his daughter's expression. She didn't look scared, she looked curious, the way she always did when she was building a new story in her head. He smiled and told her it was probably just a reflection, maybe from a neighbor's window or the porch light. He told her to come inside and wash up for dinner. She nodded, she went upstairs, and she didn't say anything else about it that night. But she thought about it. She thought about it a lot, because it hadn't looked like a reflection. Reflections don't have eyes that track you. Reflections don't smile wider when you lean in closer to look. Reflections don't move when the water is completely still. She saw it again 3 days later. This time it was mid-afternoon, bright sunny day. Tyler was in the pool with her, splashing around, doing his thing. Lily was on the inflatable float, lying on her stomach, face hovering just above the surface of the water. She was watching a beetle that had fallen in and was struggling near the edge, and then the beetle just stopped mattering, because there it was again, down in the deep end, where the shadow of the oak tree darkened the water. That face, long, pale neck stretched too far, dark, hollow eyes, wide smile. Too many teeth. It was just there, still, looking directly at her through 6 feet of water like it was glass. Lily sat up fast. Her heart was hammering. She looked over at Tyler. He had his back to her, splashing around near the ladder. She looked back at the deep end. The face was gone, just blue water and the shadow of the tree. She climbed off the float and got out of the pool without saying a word. She didn't go back in for the rest of the day. Now here is where the story gets really interesting, because Lily didn't tell anyone what she saw. Not Tyler, not her dad, not her mom when Karen got home that night. She kept it completely to herself, and you might wonder why.
You might think a 9-year-old girl should run screaming to her parents after seeing something like that. But think about it from Lily's perspective for a second. She was a kid who was known for having a big imagination. She was always making up stories. She knew that if she told her parents she saw a monster face in the pool again, they would smile and nod and tell her it was nothing, and secretly start worrying about whether she was watching too much TV or spending too much time in her own head. She didn't want to be that kid, so she stayed quiet. She processed it on her own. She started drawing the face in her sketchbook. She gave the figure a name, the way children do with the things that frighten them, because naming something makes it feel smaller, more contained, more like something you have power over. She called her MOMO. She had no idea that was already a name. She had no idea what was already out there on the internet carrying that name. To Lily, it was just the name her brain gave to the thing in the water. Meanwhile, things in the house started to shift in ways that nobody could quite pin down. David started sleeping badly. He'd wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning for no reason and lie there in the dark with this crawling feeling on the back of his neck, like something in the room was watching him. He'd get up, get a glass of water, look out the kitchen window at the backyard. The pool would be sitting there under the moonlight, perfectly still, perfectly silent. Nothing wrong. He'd go back to bed. He'd tell himself he was just stressed about work. Tyler started avoiding the pool. He didn't say why. If you asked him, he'd shrug and say he just wasn't in the mood to swim. But the truth was that the previous week, he'd been floating in the pool alone at dusk, and he'd felt something brush against his leg. Not a leaf, not a bug, something with a different texture, something that felt almost intentional. He scrambled out of the pool so fast he'd scraped his shin on the ladder. He stood on the deck breathing hard, staring at the water. Nothing, just water. He felt stupid. He went inside. He didn't tell anyone. He just quietly stopped going in the pool. And Karen was a nurse. She was a practical, grounded, no-nonsense woman who believed in things she could see and touch and measure. She did not believe in ghosts or monsters or things that go bump in the night. She'd seen too much real suffering in the hospital to have room for supernatural fear. But even Karen started feeling something that month. Not anything she could point to, just a general low-level dread that settled over her whenever she came home after a night shift and walked through the quiet house in the early morning hours. She'd check on the kids the way she always did. She'd look at Lily sleeping. She'd look at Tyler. And then for some reason she couldn't explain, she'd go to the kitchen window and look out the backyard, every time, like something was pulling her there. And every time she'd stand there for a moment in the dark kitchen, watching that still water before making herself turn away and go to bed. 4 weeks into summer, everything accelerated. It was a Friday night. Karen was at work. David had fallen asleep on the couch watching the game. Tyler was in his room gaming with headphones on. And Lily was in bed, but not asleep. She was lying there in the dark, thinking about the face in the pool. She'd been thinking about it constantly lately. It filled her drawings, it filled her daydreams, and now it was filling her nights too. She kept seeing those hollow, dark eyes and that too wide smile every time she closed her own eyes. At some point around midnight, something made her get up. She couldn't explain it later. It wasn't like a voice, it wasn't like a dream. It was more like a pull, a gravity, like the way you're drawn to look over the edge of a bridge even when you're scared of heights. She got up, padded down the stairs in socks, and went to the back door. She looked out through the glass at the backyard, at the pool. The water was glowing. Not from the pool light. The pool light had not been turned on. It was more like a faint, cold luminescence rising from the water itself. Pale blue-white. Wrong. And there, at the surface of the deep end, just barely above the waterline, was the face. But it wasn't below the surface this time. It was at the surface, looking directly at the back door, looking directly at Lily. Lily stood frozen. Every instinct in her body told her to run, to scream, to wake her dad. But something else held her there. Something in those hollow, dark eyes. Something in that smile. It wasn't warmth. It wasn't friendliness. But it was recognition. Like whatever it was knew her, had been watching her, had been waiting for her specifically. Then the thing spoke. Not out loud, not through the glass, but inside Lily's head, clear as a bell, she heard a voice, thin and sweet and horrible all at once, and it said one thing. It said, "Come in, the water is warm." That broke the spell. Lily screamed. She screamed loud and long and hard enough to wake the whole house. David was off the couch into the back door in about 15 seconds. He grabbed Lily, who was shaking and pointing at the pool, barely able to form words. David looked out the backyard. The water was dark and still. Nothing, just the pool sitting there under the stars the way it always did. Tyler came stumbling down the stairs. Karen called David, who left work early and was home within 30 minutes. Lily told them everything. The face, the long neck, the hollow eyes, the glowing water, the voice in her head. She told them all of it, all the things she'd been keeping to herself for weeks, and now, watching her parents' faces, she understood why she'd been afraid to say it, because they looked exactly how she'd feared they would look. Concerned, gentle, skeptical. David checked the pool. Nothing in it. He checked the filter, the pump, the lights. All normal. Tyler stood in the doorway watching, saying nothing, hugging himself. Karen sat with Lily on the couch and spoke to her in that calm nurse's voice, asking careful questions, wondering gently whether Lily had fallen asleep.